So I'm still getting a hang of the new job, and with the holidays and everything, in December, I kind of just missed putting out a video in December. And I was originally going to do this video in December, then have a video on video games, and then another one on Star Wars for later in the month. This video is about the fact that I did NaNoWriMo, kind of. I cheated a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, NaNoWriMo is short for National Novel Writing Month. It's a month where you write about 1,700 words a day, with the goal of getting 50,000 words by the end of the month. Now, I cheated a little bit. I started around, I think I started around 14,000 words already typed. So I did cheat, but I still wrote a lot, and I still like the stuff I wrote. So this video is just about what I wrote for NaNoWriMo. In addition to hopefully still putting up a few videos sometimes, occasionally, I'm also working on a screenplay, and then after that I want to work on Element Keepers, which is a book that I self-published senior year of high school. Is a senior project that I've been, for like the 5 fans of that book, the 5 people I know who've really liked that book, I'm so sorry, because I do have a series planned and I'm still working on it. I just want to get the actual first book published before I work on the next one. And then I'm going to come back to this book that I'm telling you about today that I did for NaNoWriMo. The working title is The Wilderlands. I say working title because I do like the title, The Wilderlands. I like it okay. But it's also the title of an Anais Mitchell album.
Your cities are a wilderland. Look upon your children. Your cities are a wilderland.
I came up with the title about the same time I found the album. So it was, I was like, oh, what if I called it this? And then like a year later, I found the album and I was like, oh, I can't call it that. So I do want to change the title, even though I do kind of like it, and it is a term used in the book. But anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about this book. To keep myself writing every day, I posted on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media. I posted the word count I had for that day, as well as a quote that I really liked from the book. So I posted the word count and a quote I really liked that I'd written that day. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back through these quotes that I have. I'm going to read them, and I'm going to kind of explain what's happening in the book at that point. To start just with some background about the book. So it started in I want to say my senior year, junior year of high school. I was still working on Element Keepers at the time, but I'd recently read or started reading Moby Dick, and just the language in that book blew me away. If you're curious, I recommend you at least try it out. I was really struck by the powerful imagery of it, so I was like, I want to write something where I can just be pretty with my language, or at least pretty to me. Maybe everyone else is going to be like, this is gross and I don't want to touch it, but I was like, I want to kind of use this more just kind of colorful, textured language. So I came up with this book, The Wilderlands. And what it's actually about is something I stole from The Last of Us. The Last of Us is a video game. One of, in my opinion, one of the most narratively compelling pieces of media there is, that the gameplay complements the story, complements the voice, everything's working in tandem so well and so intentionally. It's a very potent piece of media. Anyway, I saw the trailer for that way before the game came out. It was like a man and a girl, and they're in the post-apocalypse, and they're trying to find a place. In writing, we steal everything. I stole from Moby Dick and The Last of Us. The 2 obvious choices, I know, when you're writing a fantasy book. The Wilderlands takes place in a world where everything is overgrown by green. The forest, the plants, the trees, everything has just sort of sprung up and consumed the world, and most of the population lives in that. There's people living outside in this forest, this overwhelming greenery, that they view the forest, Old Green, as a god. And those are kind of their gods. They've got Old Green, Grandma Dirt. Most of the people in the world are living in it, but a lot of them have built up these walls, and there's 5 cities where there's walls just keeping out the green, keeping out the people outside, and they've got roads between these 5 cities, very direct, straight lines that just cut through it, that they need to keep trimmed, and it's very much them trying to keep the wilderness clear, trying to not live in the natural world, and trying to stay as separate from it as they can. And the story starts where there's a caravan going between one city and another that's attacked by the wilder folk, who are the people who live out in the forest, in the green. And one of the main characters, the main POV character, is a warrior for the wilder folk out here, and he is attacking the caravan. He kills a bunch of people. He finds a girl and her brother, who have both been captured by his people, by the wilder folk. And they escape, and he goes after them, and they kind of end up in a situation where the girl, her brother, and this protector that the girl and the boy had all need to work to find their way back to one of these 5 cities. And this is complicated by the fact that one of the people Nalk killed was their mother, the girl and the boy's mother. So she has kind of sworn to kill him, but they're in a situation where they need to survive. He also broke the arm of the protector. So, Red is the name of the protector. So Red can't use his sword. Anyway, so that's the description of the actual plot. What I find interesting about the book, kind of the reason I wrote it, or continued to write it rather, is that once I got to college, even in high school, we talked about the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest written stories ever. And in college, we spent a year or a semester talking about Beowulf and oral storytelling, and I kind of got this idea like, oh, I really want to write something that feels like an oral story. So there's a narrator to this that has a very powerful voice and is clearly telling this story to someone or some people. I also like, okay, we've got this oral story. We've got this story that is about these people. I've got the plot set up. I've got this stuff. And what I decided to do with it, and this was also an early decision, this wasn't something I changed in rewrites, was that the world they're in is presented as a fantasy world. It feels like a fantasy world. They run into things and experience things that you'd expect from a fantasy world, but it's actually a post-apocalyptic future. This isn't ever addressed directly in the text, but there's tidbits and things in there to kind of indicate that, hey, there's technology that's long ago been forgotten, that is present here. Our past is our present, our future, also our past. You get it. It's all. Yeah. So that was my idea for the book. Anyway, now it's been like 20 minutes. So now I'm going to go in and do the thing I was setting out to do, which is read you the quotes that I decided to post from this book during NaNoWriMo, which is months ago. But yeah, let's see what the first one is. So November 1st, I did 1,700 words exactly, and this is the quote. They came to quiet compromise. Let the other linger for the time until all ends were tied and bound, a contract sealed in silence with the intent that blood would break it. This they understood. And this is when Nalk and Dorina are coming to kind of an understanding. They're both bloodied and broken at this point, and they just want to live to see another day. She wants to kill him, but she also understands that in order to do that and kind of also keep her brother safe, that for the moment they have to do this. November 2nd, this is 1,668 words. Thing about silver tips is, if you're as close to one as I am to you now, you don't really see the silver tip. You see morsels. eyes as orange as uggerfish venom, a jaw sized to chomp you whole, a hunger-hewn chest with room for you and 3 bosom brothers. But it's actually just a grizzly bear, so I apologize for killing the magic of that moment for people who hopefully eventually get to read this book. Then I missed a day, but on the 4th I've got 1,200 words. "They're dead," she proclaimed. "They're all dead." She laughed. The screams of the dead rose up from the earth, but her voice stayed clear above them. "Now you know, murderer, you kill and you kill and you kill, you dealt death, suffering. Now all your bloody wages have bought you is sanguine remedy." And this is Dorina kind of having an emotional breakdown here during a very powerful scene. I'm going to try not to spoil the rest of these too much. But this is her kind of just feeling that Nalk has gotten what's coming to him. This is a quote from the narrator. This is the narrator, yeah. "This is something I know you haven't witnessed, child. The Valforians called it the Sea of Mist because that was all they saw. Those who didn't build the bridge going over leastways. Most just saw mist stretching out to the horizon and nothing else below. The River of Tears and Screams is what wild folk called it, because unlike the Valforians, they had to wade through it." So that's from one of my favorite parts of the book that was inspired by, I'm going to do a quick Google. Okay, so this was inspired by a painting I saw during my AP Euro class in high school called The Wanderer Above a Sea of Mist by Friedrich. So I saw that picture and was like, this would make a great just set piece in a fantasy movie. Like, I really liked that imagery and the idea of going down into that mist. So they view the mist in this world as kind of a god. Like, you go down into the mist and you lose all sense of place and where you are because you can't see anything and there's no landmarkers down in this sea. So the Valforians, those are the people who built the 5 cities, they built a bridge across it so they can just walk over the mist. But since they don't get along with the Wilder folk, they don't let them cross the bridge. That if they find them on the bridge, there's a watchtower nearby, they kill them. So if the Wilder folk need to get to the other side, they need to go through the mist, which is what our protagonists end up doing. A few times he took his steel back from her to see if he could make it sing again. A swing and a side snick and he'd draw a good hum from it. But his muscles were pain-sogged, and he wasn't yet used to missing an arm, so he'd tire afore he could start a song of worthy sort. And that's just Red practicing using his sword again. Again, his arm was broken, so he's trying to kind of get back into the rhythm of it. It was made of stone and wood and man's hubris. It was like the spine of Grandma Dirt had been twisted skyward. That's kind of Nalk's impression, the narrator's impression of it, because they're not used to seeing monuments like this made of stone and wood and reaching this far up. They sank out of sight and sanity. The mist was the only god that knew them now. That's when they're actually going into the mist. I think that's the end of one of the chapters. And here's the next one. They were gnawing, chewing the foundations of the bridge, enough force in each bite that their chomps should have been tooth-shattering. But it wasn't. It didn't do much to brittle the bridge, but not much ain't nothing. 100 of these things gnawing at the bone of this bridge for a year's time could turn the foundation frail. And this is other people. They go down into the mist and they see these things that have presumably been people that have been lost in the mist and kept immortal down here, according to stories, by the mist, who are trying to bring down this bridge so that more people fall into the mist with them. Papa's son was hateful in his coming the next morning. Seeing their loss in garish gleam, seeing the night black burned away to show that the boy had not returned, dealt the cruelest wound, though not the last. And I won't say too much about that one, but Papa's son at the beginning there is, again, another allusion to how they view a lot of the natural world as gods, as deities, like people way back in the day did, like the Egyptians, like the Romans did. At least that's how the Wilder folk do it. The Valforians have a more typically, it's not quite monotheism, but they've got a very limited set of gods that aren't embodied by certain things. And then here's the next one. They walked then as they had walked before, but lighter of flesh and heavier of heart. And that's only 430 words after my last quote. This is actually the same day I started my new job, which on Monday I'll have been at for 2 months exactly. So, yeah, snaps to me. And then here's the next one. Moss flesh and beetle-eyed, the wizard seemed hardly a man, yet he was haunched up and carried an iron staff in his hands that might have been human, were it not for their hair. People sing of the frightsome things wizards do, but some will send you quaking just to behold. So wizards in this world are not the way we kind of imagine wizards now. I'd say they go back to kind of the original idea of Merlin, where they're these people in the woods, but it's kind of different than that. They live separate from society, but they're kind of otherworldly. They're not connected to nature in this world, and it's kind of strange and weird for everyone. So even though they live out in the green, in the Wilderlands, they're kind of alien to everyone. Perched bird-like at the top of a tree with no branches or leaves, no shade and no fruit, green and brown and black, it was hard to tell if it was robes or all just colored flesh flaps and feathers. That was a description of the wizard again, just kind of otherworldly, kind of weird to behold for everyone. Then November 19th here. I'll weave you the story Nauk whispered to Red, for when he spoke it was in Valforian, and stories in Valforian don't sing like Wilder tongue. Even the lowest of our tellers could word-whip the tallest Valforian teller. Like as not, you already heard this tale as far back as when all you minded were teat and tears, but you ain't heard me weave it for you. And that's the narrator about to tell the story of the sun and the moon and those gods specifically, as Nauk is also telling the story to Red. And this is kind of a bonding moment for them where they're commiserating over their shared tragedy. And then this is also the 19th. I was productive that day. Yeah, it looks like, beginning of the 19th I had 557 words. End of the 19th I had a total of 1,500 words, a little bit more than that. Long was the buzz and wail of Wilderlands, and long was the night sigh as it blustered against them, but neither man were bent to blanket or bed, and long are the lives of those who know the dead and dying. Red's fingers relaxed, and he stopped his phantom clutching. I don't believe I've asked you your name. No, the other nodded. You haven't. And he never did. There they sat, one man red and nameless, and the other having name he never spoke. The long night wound on. And that's the end of the story. Again, they've kind of bonded over their shared tragedies. And then this is the next day, the 20th. Lightning lurched his hand, Red reared for his friend, his death-maker. It ripped through root and vine, easy as flesh and vein. He lacked a hand and was time-rested, but he knew his steel and it knew him. It hummed for him, barred bars that come before blood in battle. I really like that bit, just, it hummed for him, barred bars that come afore blood and battle. Just, oof. I really like praising my own writing. I'm one of those weird people who I do like going back and reading old things, mainly because I'll find, even if I kind of cringe at the whole thing, there's tidbits. I'll just be like, oh man, I nailed it. Yeah, I don't know. Again, you may not like it. Totally fine. But yeah, I really like it. That's why I wrote it. And then the 22nd here. The knife of her mother and the sword of her father hung from her belt. Her brother had had no name and thus had nothing, and so she had nothing to remember him by. And there was Nauk, lingering on her like a dead limb, still clinging even as the rest of the body turns to deeper rot. Yeah, and I won't say too much about that one either. I think it's already probably... that one is already probably pretty spoilery and self-explanatory as it stands. Death leaned forward, but he wasn't watching death. He looked at his flesh, his blood, his daughter, and felt the sting of tears in his eyes, and he smiled, not red, but wide and white as winter root. Another bit I really, really like there, and that I'm not going to say too much about. And then I did 2,689 words on the 24th to get back on track. This story is like to make you hate me deeper, Nalk said. But wait till the end. You're like to hate me different at the end than you do at the start. And this is kind of when Nalk is kind of explaining everything about him and where he comes from, which is one of the things I need to go back and fix, is some stuff about Nalk to be consistent with the story I have him telling here. And then this is the 25th, 1,448 words. I was always told those were the names of the men who founded the Valforian cities, Regus, Alix, Rouvs, and Aelink. Each of them founded one of the 5 cities and then came here to found Ilmiv, she said. Nalk nodded. Different than the stories I've heard. We do have an Alix, though. Alix who killed the world, who got the wrath of the Green God. Think they're the same? She shook her head. I couldn't say, I don't know. Do you think either of our stories are true? Nalk sighed and spat. If you're not right and I'm not right, I don't know where that leaves us. And yeah, that's Nalk and Dorina talking about religion. Don't talk about politics or religion. But they manage okay at this point, considering one of them, at least one of them, wants to kill the other. It's one of their calmer talks. November 26th. Both the blood-weary fighters turned, ready to melt back to battle-minded things. The red that covered them faded from thought, the bones around them crumbled from memory. They were not blade or body or bloody aim, they were creatures fighting only to breathe now and breathe again. And that's maybe my favorite quote that I put on here. This is also kind of the point where I'm in the last 4 days of NaNoWriMo, so I was just scrambling to finish. From this point on, the book is close to incoherent for the last few thousand words, last chapter or two. It's just almost impossible to understand, but I hit that 50,000 goal, so that's what counts. The 28th. Back when all I'm telling you was still unfolding, those walls weren't just mighty, but indomitable. They were indomitable. Now it's ruins. This is how it was then. Back then it was something that could never have succumbed to the rot of ages. And that's the narrator, again, kind of recalling things past, because even the narrator is living in a future beyond where the story is happening. So there are ruins of places from the story that it's kind of interesting to me. And then on the 29th, I wasn't able to write anything because of stressful things. But I posted the first, or some of the first lines from the book that have been in there a while, and kind of the lines that got me kick-started into it way back when. This story begins as all things do, in fire. So those are no longer the first words of the story, but they are there, very close to the beginning. And then this is the last day. Oh, we made it! I've been sitting here for like an hour reading this. So November 30th, this is 3,948 words written on that day. Total for the month, I had 34,297 words written, and the total in my novel was 50,031 words. So this is the first time even though I'd cheated and used text that already had like 16,000 words in it, this was the first time I finished NaNoWriMo, so I felt pretty good about it. I do a lot of things. And here is my final quote, and the current last lines of the book. Her sword was heavy, but still she adorned it with vengeance. She lifted it. Her hands were shaking, but still she marked their aim. She tightened them. Her eyes were wet, but still they held fire. She focused them. Never blinking, never wavering, but made stiff by the weight of what she had to do, she brought her blade to blow, and blade bought bitter blood. This story ends as all stories must, in silence.